Welcome to Quantum Flux, the official podcast of Nonlocal Science Fiction magazine and nonlocalsci-fi.com. I'm the editor of Nonlocal Science Fiction, Dan Dombrowski. The first issue of Nonlocal Science Fiction is available now on nonlocalsci-fi.com and through major ebook retailers like Amazon, iBooks, and the Nook Marketplace. Today I'm talking via Skype with Aaron Hamilton, author of the short story Catalyst, which appears in issue number 1 of Nonlocal Science Fiction. Welcome to the podcast, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan. It's good to be here.
Let's start out talking about Catalyst. What inspired you to write this story? Where did your idea originally come from?
I have an interest in science. I don't have a particularly scientific background. And the concept of a catalyst was interesting to me, and I thought it would make a good story to write something where we were talking both about a chemical and a social catalyst.
Your main character, Cribbs, is this grizzled old smuggler. He's sort of an iconoclast, or the charismatic rogue archetype we see so often. He's old, he's world-weary. Why did you choose to write him the way that you did?
Mainly, I wanted a character who had been around the block and seen just about everything there was to see, so that when he's surprised in the story, it really gives you something to think about just how severe things are. If not many other things would take him aback, then you know what's going on is truly horrifying.
Catalyst is unique in the first issue of Nonlocal Science Fiction in that it's essentially a scene study. The entire story takes place on Cribbs' ship in a short period of time, and except for one quick interlude, the entire thing is one unbroken scene. Were you trying to accomplish anything specific by telling the story this way?
Originally, I was going to feature the escape from Cribbs' captor Mogadou in the story, and I decided to shorten it mainly because places I had looked at possible submissions wanted shorter stories. Also because I thought it would be more fun just to throw people into the middle of what was going on instead of start from that point. So after I started it there in the middle on the ship, I realized it was going to work better, and it all just kind of played out in front of me very quickly, and I ended up writing the first draft very quickly.
I was impressed by the amount of world building you did for a story that only runs about 1,600 words or so. You create an entire universe that has specific technologies, a political structure, and a whole lot more. Is Catalyst one piece of a larger story, or did you come up with all this detail just for this one short story?
For this particular story, this all just came together on its own. It just kind of played out in my mind like a movie, and I just ran with it as basically a large action sequence, self-contained.
I can definitely see that. It definitely has a cinematic quality to it. I did really enjoy this little universe you created. Maybe someday you'll be able to return to it. Turning to the more personal side of things, you currently live near Raleigh, North Carolina. How'd you end up there?
I was. It wasn't long after I was out of college, and I didn't have a whole lot of job prospects for the field of study that I'd entered. So I had always liked North Carolina when I would stop here on the way to Florida to see grandparents, and I phoned up a buddy and told him that I was planning to throw everything I owned in my car, which wasn't a whole lot, and just drive down and try to get a job. And so he ended up coming with me for a little while, and then ended up going back, and I found some other friends that I didn't know that were down here and ended up staying, and definitely haven't regretted missing out on most of the nasty winter weather up there in the north.
Yeah, we're just recovering from winter here in Erie. We're seeing grass for the first time since October. What part of New York are you from originally?
I'm in between Binghamton, New York, and Albany, New York, so more centrally located.
So you do know what real winter is then?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm definitely a little jealous of you being further south and escaping most of the snow this year. Growing up in New York, did you see yourself as a writer when you got older? Has making a living as a writer always been a goal for you?
It really has. I started writing stories when I was pretty young, middle school age, and really enjoyed it. Um, and I had a friend who started publishing his own small newspaper. I think it was his grandmother gave him a printing press, which is something that he wanted, and he started churning out this newspaper that featured little articles about our school and things around our tiny town. And he gave me the opportunity to write a couple of fiction pieces to feature in it.
What types of fiction were you writing back at the beginning? Were you writing science fiction even back then?
If I remember correctly, one of them was a horror story, and one was a western. Actually, I always liked sci-fi, but I hadn't really started writing it at that point. So after those initial publications, I realized, wow, this would be awesome to be able to make a living doing this. And I had always wanted to, but had seen it, as a real challenge to make a living doing it, and pursued other avenues instead.
I always find it interesting to learn how writers get into writing, especially at a young age when they're still in school. Some are drawn in by the classics that you have to read for class, and they take a very literary approach to writing. Other people run in the opposite direction. They don't like reading quote-unquote good books, so they decide to write something they do like. Where did you fall?
I was always more of a fan of entertainment kind of reading. I like adventure, and I like the science fiction genre and horror and fantasy. While I did well in school, I often just read my English assignments because I had to. There were a few exceptions. I remember reading The Scarlet Pimpernel, which I liked, and I took a Western class, which was pretty cool. But for the most part, in my free time, I stayed away from literature and just read stuff that was entertaining to me.
You took a class in Westerns in high school or in college?
In high school, we had a pretty, for such a small school, a pretty diverse English department, and I had finished all my requirements to graduate my junior year just about. So my senior year, I took almost exclusively the more fun English classes, a short story class and a Western class, to name a couple. Most by the same English teacher, and a lot of writing, creative writing class thrown in there too. So that was a lot of fun, and he actually encouraged me to study English in college and perhaps become an English teacher myself. But I realized that I wouldn't want to have to read all the things that would be required of me in college level courses to do that.
It's interesting. I interviewed Dan Colton a few days ago, and he talked about a science fiction class that he took in high school. I think I missed out a little bit with my English education. We had the 4 standard years of English literature, and then I think we had a creative writing class, which I didn't take because I didn't have much interest in creative writing back then. I did get some leeway my junior year in an advanced American Lit class. We were able to pick the books we read for a couple of different projects. The only requirement was that they had to be by an influential American author. Pretty much everything I did was by Isaac Asimov. The teacher really encouraged me to read and explore what interested me, but I think by the end of the year, my classmates were pretty tired of hearing me talk about Asimov.
I had more opportunity in college. I didn't really take any English classes, but I took a couple of history classes that allowed me to read some interesting stuff. One was called A History of the Future, and included some readings like Brave New World. The alternative to writing a paper for the class was to write some fiction, and I remember writing a post-apocalyptic science fiction story for that class. That was a lot of fun.
Well, maybe if you dig that up, you can submit it for non-local at some point.
Looking back, it wasn't very good. But maybe with some work.
Do you see yourself as a naturally creative person, or do you find that you have to work pretty hard to come up with stories and characters?
I'm pretty creative. My son, when he was younger, used to demand a new story every day on the way to school in the car, and even though a lot of them, there were caveats, a lot of them he wanted certain characters from diverse things such as Marvel characters mixed in with Scooby-Doo and the gang and other stuff. I was pretty good at thinking on the fly to provide him with new stories that would entertain him for 15 or 20 minutes. And I do have a lot of interests and things that pop into my head all the time. It's easy enough to get started. What I find is often the case is that it takes a lot more work to knit together a plot and finish something. So I have a lot of things about half started that I'll get back to it at some point. But maybe it's ADD. I don't know what it is, but I seem to start a lot of projects that I don't finish, either because they don't play out in my head quite as easily as others, or just because I seem to run out of time.
It might just be that you have good instincts. I find that sometimes it's really hard to walk away from a project once I've invested a lot of time and energy into it. I don't like to leave things unfinished, and I find that I end up wasting a lot of time on projects that never grow and turn into anything usable in the end. So maybe it's a good thing that you have this ability to just walk away from a project once it's clear it's not going in a positive direction.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, that's encouraging.
Moving on to your college years, did you study creative writing at all at a university level?
No, I took one creative writing class, but I was a lot more interested in writing genre stuff, horror and science fiction and fantasy, and most of the creative writing majors that I knew wanted to write literature. And that's how our creative writing magazine for the school was geared to. There wasn't really any room for any genre type stuff. So I didn't pursue that any further. And I didn't take a lot of English classes in college. I took a lot of writing classes where I did a lot of research papers, but I didn't take any real English classes.
So what did you end up studying primarily?
I went to school for environmental studies, and it gave me the opportunity to take a broad range of classes because I have a lot of interests, everything from biology and anthropology to political science and economics. And I guess it was the perfect major for somebody that didn't really know what he wanted to do with his life. Besides write, I certainly did a lot of that.
Going into college, did you have any sort of idealized profession in mind? What did you think you wanted to be when you got out of school?
Originally, I had thought about medicine, and that quickly changed as I started into some of the harder science classes and realized that just that wasn't going to hold my interest. And I just wasn't driven enough to see it through to completion when I was interested in so many other things as well. So I've had thought about anthropology seriously, and the environmental studies seemed like a better way to go at the time. There seemed to be a growing environmental movement, and the possibility for employment when I graduated seemed better.
I can certainly vouch for a degree in anthropology not leading to many employment prospects coming out of school. It's something you really need to stick with and really earn your graduate degrees to find a career. I stayed and got my master's and still wasn't able to find anything. It's almost mandatory to stay in and get a doctorate, which is unfortunate. Well, since you brought it up, and since I know a bit about anthropology, what aspect of the major interested you? Were you looking at the cultural end, or were you more interested in archaeology?
I was more interested in cultural anthropology. I took a couple of classes that were geared toward that more than archaeology. I did take I don't remember the exact title of it. My friends referred to it simply as Bones and Teeth archaeology class, and I liked my professor and even talked to him about doing a summer internship out along one of the riverbeds where they were frequently finding some Native American potsherds and arrowheads and things like that. But I realized that that wasn't where my interest really lay. I was more interested in learning about different kinds of people and their societies.
And certainly, as you say, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for that kind of study anymore. There are just so few pristine indigenous cultures left. More and more cultural anthropologists are studying subcultures in cities or working for marketing companies rather than fulfilling that romantic vision of living with the Messiah in Africa. And the same goes for archaeology. You can't be Indiana Jones. If you pursue a career in archaeology and you don't go into academia, chances are you'll spend your life digging ditches for survey work and holding up construction crews trying to build new highways and things like that.
Did you get yourself a bullwhip by any chance, just for fun?
I did not, actually. I had a pretty rockin' khaki vest at one point with a bunch of pockets for all my various tools. That was pretty awesome.
Okay. I think a part of it that appealed to me was maybe the prospect of just writing a book or two about different kinds of people to dispel some of the ignorance about different cultures that we have. And growing up in America, where I feel like a lot of places around the globe look to us, it's very easy to have this kind of mindset where we are at the center of everything, being in America. And a lot of people, I don't think, get as exposed to other cultures as they really should. So I thought, well, maybe someday I could write a book that might be both entertaining and informative enough that people start to question whether that's a healthy attitude to have of this ethnocentrism in America.
That's definitely very admirable. Your goal for down the line is to be a full-time writer, right?
Yes, that would be great. That I can't really even express how wonderful that would be.
So, looking at tackling issues like ethnocentrism, do you see yourself more writing fiction that has a very definite theme or a message behind it, as many science fiction authors have done over the years, or do you think you'd go more in the nonfiction direction and hit the issues you care about head on?
That kind of ended with school. I mean, I certainly see the possibility of tackling issues like that, even in science fiction, where I may not be talking about, our planet. I may just be broaching the subject of being openly accepting to other cultures in a science fiction setting. But mainly what I want to write now is just entertainment. It's what I like to read, and it's what I like to write.
What are you reading at the moment?
Right now I'm reading Toll the Hounds by Stephen Erickson. It's, I think, the 8th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. And he has quite an anthropology background, which is something that first attracted me to him as an author. His world is populated with a real diverse bunch of cultures and people, both human and non-human. I highly recommend them. They're extremely detailed. I joked about it on my blog. This is my second attempt reading it because it's really a lot of work to keep everything straight. He, I think, is telling really just one big story over the entire series of, I think there may be as many as 10 books. And since I don't have as much time as I used to read, sometimes it's hard for me to remember where the last one left off. But from a world building perspective, I think he's got to be one of the best that I've read.
You brought up your blog. Ever since you and I first met when you submitted Catalyst last year, you've been expanding your online footprint as an author. You have a blog called Escalator Shoes. Where did that name come from?
Mainly it comes from a desire to be taller, and it's a play on elevator shoes. But it's also a desire to keep moving forward and upward in my writing career, but also in life in general, to try to keep working at my goals, specifically writing, even if I have to take them in baby steps.
And what's the exact URL for the blog? Go ahead and plug it.
It's escalatorshoes.blogspot.com.
You're also active on Twitter. Your handle there is @AaronLHamilton. Are you active anywhere else on social media?
I'm active on Facebook, but primarily just socially and not so much for my writing career. Mostly friends and family.
Getting back to science fiction, where would you say you draw your inspiration primarily? Do you take a lot from what you're reading? You mentioned the Malazan series specifically.
I try not to. I'm so afraid, even unintentionally, of ripping something off that somebody else has written. My biggest inspiration so far has probably been with my role-playing group. We play over Skype, usually once a week or so, a group of 2 other friends of mine from high school and myself. And we play games from various genres, sci-fi, fantasy, and some horror. So that's just the very nature of it is collaborative storytelling and generation of characters, and as the game master occasionally, also creating the entire plot line and adapting it to what the other players are doing and saying. So that's been a big influence. It's probably generated at least 3 or 4 stories that I can think of over the past, and most recently in the sci-fi genre, some post-apocalyptic short stories that I've been writing.
You've told me also that you're currently working on a book.
Yes. Yeah, I'm currently outlining a novel. I didn't start out outlining it. I wrote the first chapter and then realized, because of my time limitations, that I should probably outline it first, just so that I can get everything down and all the ideas ordered the way I wanted them before proceeding them, in case, I might only have 10 or 15 minutes some days to work on it. So outlining it seemed like the way to go.
Can you tell us anything about the plot, or are you trying to keep everything pretty hush-hush for the moment?
I can say a few things about it. It's I'm most concerned with just creating a story with a lot of the elements that make good story. Conflict, of course, but also well-developed characters who have the same kind of problems and joys in their lives that we do, and then setting that story on Earth in the future after an alien occupation, and watching as the protagonist, a girl about to graduate from high school, is confronted with some difficult choices that she has to make, and influenced by some of the aliens that she has come in contact with, and also a rebellion against them that has formed during the occupation.
That definitely sounds really interesting. I wish you luck with it. Well, that about does it. Thanks for joining us today, Aaron.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I look forward to talking to you again at some point, hopefully.
Once again, I've been talking to Aaron Hamilton, the author of Catalyst, a short story that appears in the first issue of Nonlocal Science Fiction, available now on nonlocalsci-fi.com and increasingly on major ebook retail sites like Amazon, iBooks, and the Nook Marketplace. Thanks for listening to this episode of Quantum Flux, the podcast of Nonlocal Science Fiction magazine and nonlocalsci-fi.com. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you never miss an episode. Music was provided by Kevin MacLeod and incomptech.com.